I call this meeting of Township High School District 211 Board of Education to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Dombrowski.
Here.
Mr. Hinshaw.
Here.
Mrs. Klimkowitz.
Here.
Mr. Lefevre.
Here.
Mr. Rosenblum.
Here.
Mr. Young.
Here.
Mrs. Burke.
Here, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Good evening and welcome. We'll begin tonight's meeting with our recognitions. Dr. Cates.
Welcome to everyone. It is great to have you here with us to recognize some outstanding students. At this time, I'd like to ask Board President Musia Burke to join Associate Superintendent Mark Kovac at the podium as we begin our recognition ceremony with some terrific accomplishments. And Mr. Kovac.
Thank you, Dr. Cates. Good evening, Board of Education, administrators, faculty, and honored guests. Begun in 1955, the National Merit Scholarship Program's mission is to ensure that the very brightest students are provided the opportunity to pursue higher education and to enable those students to serve our nation. It's my pleasure tonight to introduce you to students from District 211's class of 2019 who have distinguished themselves as National Merit Scholars. The National Merit Scholarship competition for these students began about a year ago when they completed the Preliminary Scholastic Aptitude Test. It's commonly called the PSAT, along with 1.6 million other American high school students. And based on that assessment, 16,000 students from across the country received recognition from the College Board as semifinalists in the National Merit Scholarship competition. These 31 District 211 students are among those semifinalists and are among the top 1% of students across the nation. Tonight, each of these students will be presented with District 211's Robert Creek Excellence Award. This award is named in honor of Robert Creek, who served District 211 as a board member for 20 years, 19 of those as board president. Mr. Creek had distinguished himself by promoting a consistent vision of student and teacher excellence in District 211. Thank you, Mrs. Burke, for joining me tonight to present the award to these outstanding students. Students, I will ask you to step forward to the podium when I call your name to receive your medallion. Parents, please stand as we recognize your students so we might recognize you as well for the contributions that you have given to help them reach this pivotal moment. As you can imagine, these students are highly involved in our schools and in our communities, and so several students weren't able to join us due to some other responsibilities they have, but tonight I am pleased to recognize a large set of them. So I will start with no further ado. Nikita Basu. Arnav Bada. Hannah Chen. Christina Chen. Matthew Corrigan. Sarah Ernie. Bill Gao. Lydia Ham. Duncan Harrow. Christina Hugh. Megan Zhang. Aaron Kleinschmidt. Kevin Lee. Martin Mihalski. Rajat Mittal. Anthony Mew. Shriha Mukherjee. And in the nick of time, it looks like Joshua Park is here. Mayor Papuri. Shreya Prasad. Nilay Saram. Sarah Stapleton. Surav Sumagan. John Wang. Michelle Zhang. And Flora Zhang. Thank you all for joining me this evening to recognize these students and their families, and we are excited to learn about their exciting accomplishments to come.
It's not often that we have an opportunity to recognize local heroes. However, this evening we have a very special hero from Conant High School with us. As a result of her courage and quick-thinking reactions, she made a life-saving difference in someone's life. The Board of Education is pleased to recognize the student for her heroics, and Board President Mrs. Burke will present a certificate to her in just a moment. This time I'd like to ask Conant High School science teacher John Shuro to come to the podium to introduce us to someone very special.
I'd like to say thank you to Mrs. Burke, members of the board, Dr. Cates, for taking time to honor Caitlin O'Brien tonight. Caitlin, I'd like to thank you for choosing me to introduce you. Your first choice must not have been available. I've had the privilege to have Katie in class for 2 years now. Last year, she was in my Introduction to Health Occupations and Medical Terminology class. This year, she's in my Anatomy and Physiology class. She's also in our Certified Nurses Assistant course at Conant High School. I found Katie to be bright. She's spirited, inquisitive, and has a great sense of humor. She literally makes me laugh every day in class. Okay? In the medical terminology class, we teach CPR. And on a Saturday night in September, Katie had the opportunity to practice those skills. Katie works in a local restaurant in the front part, and one of the waitresses came running up to tell the boss that they needed to call 911 because there was an unresponsive woman in the dining room. Katie overheard this, made her way into the dining room, where she and the woman's daughter performed two-person CPR on the woman. Now, two-person CPR is not taught in a standard CPR course, but in the healthcare provider CPR we teach in medical terminology, it is. Because of Katie's actions, she helped save this woman's life. Even though she was not responsive as they were leaving the restaurant later on, she was revived. This is impressive, but not surprising. This is the take action type of decisiveness that I've learned to expect from Katie. And Katie has a desire to become a nurse someday, and I believe that this is just one in many adventures that she will see in the years, because I really believe that Katie someday will be an excellent healthcare professional. Congratulations.
At At this time, the board will take a short recess to allow for photographs of our recipients of tonight, and congratulations once again. Okay, we'll begin our business portion of the meeting. We will have our citizens' appearance and presentation. Is there anyone in the audience who did not sign the yellow sheet that would like to address the Board of Education? Don't see any, so at this time, I'd like to ask Maria Coons to come to the podium to address the Board of Education.
Good evening. My name is Maria Coons, and I'm the Vice President and Chief of Staff at Harper College, and I'm delighted to be here this evening. I wanted to provide an update on our campus master plan and some of the community outreach activities we have going on at the college. Just a quick update on Harper College. We serve 23 communities here in the northwest suburbs, and that is 520,000 residents and 35,000 students each year. We're largely defined by our high school districts, and 211 is in the central part of our district. We also serve students in districts 214 and 220. We have firmly been focused in student success, and we're very proud of our partnerships, particularly with our high schools, our businesses, and our four-year universities who are now on our campus delivering baccalaureate degrees and above to our students. Our goal has been student success for many years, and we are proud of the innovative programs that we've brought to Harper to keep our tuition affordable. One of those programs is our Promise program, and we currently have more than 6,200 high school students who continue to earn a free tuition at Harper College. As they enter the college, they have progressed through the high school, completing criteria in 5 areas, including solid grades, community service, and so forth. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary, and one of the proud moments was a video we received from Dr. Cates, who actually sang happy birthday to us.
I did.
And it's one of our favorite artifacts that we've kept now in our archives. So Dr. Cates, you're going to be famous for a long time. So as part of our 50th anniversary, we were also looking forward, and we had a community task force that looked at the campus to see what the priorities were going forward. And they established 3 priorities. The first priority is to continue economic opportunity throughout our district, which includes the 211 service area. And the task force thought the best way to address this was through a collaborative, innovative facility that would be a business resource center. So there we would have our small business development center, an innovation center to start small businesses, and our university center, which is where our 3 current university partners, which are Northern Illinois University, Roosevelt University, and DePaul University, who are helping us do baccalaureate and above completion. So this center would be a hub for economic opportunity throughout the district. The second priority is to help continue to educate for high-tech jobs, and this would be by modernizing some of our facilities and our curriculum. So on the east side of campus, I taught in the business school for many years. I taught in the finance area. That area of the campus needs renovation, and that also houses our education program, our computer information systems programs. And we also have need to expand in our manufacturing labs, which we have great growth in that program, and Dr. Small was involved with us when we rebooted that program about 8 years ago. We also have need for health careers, and we just saw a stellar student here who is pursuing health careers, and that is a growing area throughout the district. And the final priority is to maintain and improve our infrastructure. So those are sort of the non-visible things to keep replacing roofs, electrical, plumbing, in some of our aging facilities. We also need to invest in technologies to help keep our campus safe. So the question is, how will this be funded? Well, Harper has been fiscally responsible for many years. I've been at the school for 30 years, and I'm proud that we've had a AAA bond rating. We're one of 4 community colleges in the state, so that keeps whatever bond issues we have at the lowest possible cost. So we have an opportunity, as we have bonds that are retiring in the year 2020, and we have an opportunity to refresh those bonds, and that would bring $180 million into the college without raising taxes. If the bond issue did not pass, the average homeowner in our district, their home value is $250,000. That would mean that they would get $23 reduction in their tax bill. If it was a $500,000 valued home, it would be $46 per year. So issuing the bonds would keep the taxes at the same level because we are refreshing the bonds that are due to expire. So our Board of Trustees has placed a referendum on the November ballot, so voters will have the opportunity to decide if this is a viable solution. There is more information. I know you have information cards at your places, and it just reviews everything I just went through with you. And we also have additional information on our website at harpercollege.edu/strongfuture. So I'm happy to entertain any questions that the board may have.
Any questions?
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. This will bring us to our presentation. Dr. Cates?
This evening, we'll have Chief Operating Officer Lauren Hummel and our Controller and Treasurer Barb Peterson present information. This is our first of several months of consideration. We introduced the topics about the levy at our last meeting, and tonight we're presenting you with information and our recommendation in terms of the upcoming levy amount that you will approve in November. The levy is a sometimes complicated matter. It's an important matter, but we have put forth a great deal of effort to try to provide information so that in chapters people can consume the information, make use of it, so that we can have an informed discussion here at the board. With that, I'm going to hand it over to our two presenters this evening.
Good evening. The levy is one of the most critical components of the district that provides us with the ability to maintain financial stability both in the short and long term, allowing the district to support and sustain its instructional programs and its strategic priorities. We have shared numerous reports and presentations in previous meetings, and tonight we will continue to share with you information surrounding our recommendation for the 2018 levy. Local property taxes are the primary source of revenue for the district, comprising over 85% of our total revenue received. This revenue specifically funds our instructional and operational programs each year. Because the levy is the primary source of revenue for the district, a change from the levy recommendation can have a significant impact on the district's financial stability long term. We have shared a great deal of information in the past meeting and some of the chapters that have been prepared surrounding the two key components of the levy. What I would like to share tonight is that District 211 is now operating within its sole source of tax revenue, coming only from the aggregate operating levy. You may ask yourself why this is important and what this means for our taxpayers. By operating only within the district's operating levy, the district is seeking an amount from taxpayers that is limited each year. We are no longer adding the debt service levy to the amount as we have done for decades in the past. While there is a limit by which the district may levy for debt service annually, this limit is more than $13 million. So by not levying to repay outstanding debt, the district is operating within its means through a levy that has an imposed annual limitation, and the district is saving taxpayers the cost of added debt repayment by as much as $13 million per year.
All taxing bodies in Cook County and numerous other counties throughout the state of Illinois are subject to the Property Tax Extension Limitation Law, commonly referred to as the tax cap or PTEL. The tax cap was designed to limit taxing bodies in an amount that they may levy for the combined operating funds. Limitation is equal to the amount of the Consumer Price Index for the prior year, plus new property growth for the area. This limitation prohibits taxing bodies from increasing levies by amounts beyond the standard measure of inflation for goods and services. The debt service levy is outside of the tax cap limitations. For District 211, we will no longer have a debt service levy, and therefore the maximum amount that we can increase the levy for this year will be limited to the tax cap of 2.1% plus new property growth. What is important to note about the tax cap is that it limits the amount by which a taxing body may increase its levy. It does not limit individual tax bills. Under the tax cap laws, taxing bodies are permitted to increase their levy to include new properties that are added to the community. Essentially what they're saying is that if more properties come onto your tax rolls in your community, you are likely providing more services, and therefore you can collect more tax dollars. What is important to note here is that any increase that we receive as a result of new property growth does not impact existing taxpayers. We typically have a small amount of new property growth each year, about 0.3%. Expiring TIFs are also considered new property. We have no new TIFs. We have no expiring TIFs this year, and therefore estimate additional tax revenue from new property to be 0.3% for next year. There are 5 main components that go into the calculation of each tax bill, and as you can see, various government agencies are responsible for the various parts. The local taxing body, District 211 in this case, controls only the tax rate. While the tax rate is certainly an important part of a tax bill, it is not the only factor in determining whether a tax bill increases or decreases year over year. Disproportionate changes in other factors can drive a tax bill up or down. For example, if properties in the district increased by an average of 3% last year and your home's assessed value increased by 5%, your tax bill is likely going to increase no matter what the levy amount is that is set by the district. This is a very difficult concept for taxpayers to understand, and it certainly doesn't help with the presentation of the tax bills themselves. I can imagine that you've been approached by members of the community who have told you that their tax bill might have doubled in the last 10 years. I did some math, and if the taxing bodies increase their levies year over year by 3%, a tax bill would take 25 years to double. So there's certainly many factors that go into impacting a tax bill other than the levies that the taxing bodies set.
This list of facility improvement projects should look very familiar to you, as we have reviewed them numerous times as projects that were identified in the strategic plan, and they again have been reviewed by the Facilities Committee as well as the board over the past several years. Our long-range financial plan calls for us to utilize our operating fund levy and reserves to pay for these projects over a 10-year period. Through a limited increase in tax revenue annually and very strategic financial planning, the district has developed a long-term plan that allows for completion of these projects debt-free. Any change to this plan can inhibit our ability to fulfill that commitment, and we continue to review our planning cycle on an annual basis. Planning is now underway for next summer's capital improvement projects, which include renovations to one set of our restrooms, as well as resurfacing of 2 of our tracks and recarpeting 2 of our turf fields. Additionally, our life safety study is well underway, and we anticipate bringing that to the board for our 2018-19 life safety study to the November meeting. There are several considerations relative to the 2018 levy that are presented here for your review. As we've shared, we know that the tax cap limitation is set for the levy at 2.1% plus new property, which is estimated at 0.3%, and that this limitation is established to support the rising costs of goods and services over the prior year. We also know that we are debt-free, and we will be operating only within our capped operating levy. Due to the timing of Cook County's calculation of the 2018 tax rate, the 2018 levy, although it's passed this year, it will not impact our budget until next year. The levy remains the most critical component required to support the daily instructional and operational needs of our district, providing more than 85% of our total revenue. And while we are recommending an increase of 2.1% in the levy, we also know that we lose money to tax refunds each year. In fact, on average, we lose approximately $6.2 million annually. And just one day earlier this week, we had a single day loss of $710,000, which we were not able to recover. As previously reviewed, the 2018 levy is limited again at an increase of 2.1% plus new property estimated at 0.3%. The recommendation that we are sharing with the board this evening is consistent with the tax cap limitation. Of the district's total levy, approximately $670,000 or 0.3%, will be attributed only to new properties within our communities. While our total aggregate levy amount must not exceed last year's levy by the tax cap limitation, the way that we allocate our levy among funds may vary. Our levy in the educational fund is sufficient to continue providing a consistent level of programming for students for both our educational and extracurricular opportunities. The levy increase that's reflected in the operations and maintenance fund is used to support the operations of the district and also our major facility improvement projects. While in the past we've made several transfers out of other funds into our capital projects fund, we are now recommending that we will make those transfers from our operations and maintenance fund into the capital projects funds as a means of accounting and budgeting for those projects. Our levy recommendation for the transportation fund supports our current level of operations and includes a replacement of approximately 10% of our bus fleet for the coming year, getting us on the 10-year replacement cycle that we mentioned to you last year. You will notice a reduction in our IMRF fund levy, which is the direct result of savings that are attributed to the board's decision to reduce the district's unfunded liability. The Social Security levy is consistent with our anticipated payroll costs for our non-licensed staff members. And finally, the district's working cash levy will remain the source of funds that are required to pay for our future life safety projects. Again, because we are planning to pay for these projects debt-free, we would levy funds into this fund. We are required to either levy them into the working cash fund or the operations and maintenance fund, and then may transfer them to the life safety fund, again, for our accounting and budgeting practices. So as we just reviewed, the district's total levy is set to be equal to 2.1%, and we have reflected here the new property growth at $670,000 or 0.3%. While existing taxpayers are only assessed at a rate equal to CPI, we do want to account for our new property growth. Through a loss and cost factor that is applied by the Cook County Clerk's Office, the district will collect revenue sufficient to capture new property growth, regardless of whether or not we levy it. To remain fully transparent with the board and the community, the levy recommendation is for the full amount that we expect to be extended by the county.
Now that we are debt-free and have only an operating levy, this levy must be not only sufficient to cover our operating requirements, but it must cover our total budget. This includes all of our capital requirements, both life safety and otherwise. As the levy is 85% of our total revenue, it is critical to set the levy at an amount that will support our entire budget and keep us on the financial course set by this board to remain debt-free and complete our 10-year capital plan. As we prepare our levy recommendation each year, we also refresh our financial forecast. This forecast is combined for all funds, which includes operating and capital expenses. As you can see, our total budget is close to break even across the years as we self-fund all of our capital and life safety needs. The projection model does include $20 million from the sale of our 60 acres of land, but it does not include a specific designation for these funds. Our fund balance levels decline over the 5-year time period, even with the infusion of the $20 million into our fund balance. So what happens if we do not increase our levy? In other words, what if we have a flat levy? This year we would lose $5.3 million in revenue, and for 1 year we could sustain this loss. However, these losses compound as the current year levy is the basis for which we can increase our levy for next year. The tax cap laws do not provide a provision by which we could say, okay, we'll hold our levy flat this year, but next year, if we need it, we want to levy back more than the tax cap. It is unrecoverable outside of having a referendum. Any levy reduction under PTEL is a permanent reduction. As you can see, if we held our levy flat next year, over a 5-year time period, we would lose $27.7 million. And at that amount, we cannot sustain that loss without debt or referendum. We've been asked to create several what-if scenarios for the 2018 levy. This matrix shows 9 different levy scenarios. Down the left side is the proposed levy increase, which is straightforward. Across the top of the what-ifs is what happens to the $20 million of land sale proceeds. The column labeled no allocation means we have no specific plans for this money. We would strictly absorb that $20 million into fund balance. The middle column labeled $10 million specific allocation means that we would spend $10 million on building improvements to benefit all students, and the remaining $10 million would go into fund balance. And the final column labeled $20 million specific allocation means we would intend to spend the entire $20 million on some sort of project or improvement. We've color-coded the outcomes. The areas in red indicate combinations that produce fund balance levels below policy and would put the district in a compromised or at-risk financial situation, resulting in debt, referendum, and/or major operational restructuring. The outcomes in yellow would likely require that we stray from strategic priorities in order to maintain adequate fund balance levels. Facility improvements would not be able to be completed as committed, and IMRF contributions would be discontinued at a minimum. Let me also caution you about a couple things if we review any scenario under the PTEL limit. First of all, if we file a levy under the PTEL amount, it is a hard stop levy. What we file is what we get. That means that any revenue for new property growth would not be captured. It doesn't mean new properties would not pay taxes, but their money would go into the combined total operating levy that we would receive. Second, as we decrease our fund balance levels, we have to be very careful that the funds are actually accessible. The operating fund balances percentages are averages across the funds, not the level in each fund. Monies in the IMRF fund are not accessible for operations, and the working cash fund requires a minimum balance, so we're very cautious as our fund balance levels continue to decline. Finally, the areas in green are levy scenarios which we feel would afford the district the ability to maintain financial stability into the future. Under the direction of this Board of Education, we have worked hard to become debt-free, to pay down our pension liabilities, reduce our fund balance levels, and maximize our assets while providing quality educational programming. In the far right column, we show the financial impact of each levy scenario to the average homeowner. As you consider these levy scenarios, ask yourself if $4.54 a month is a high price to pay to maintain the financial stability that we have worked so hard to achieve.
The district works diligently to ensure that we present a levy recommendation that maintains financial stability while prudently managing taxpayer dollars. Tonight, we are presenting a levy recommendation for a 2.1% increase in order to sustain high-quality educational programs for our students. The levy recommendation is one that not only considers our current students, but will help to preserve the district's financial stability well into the future to ensure that our future students, employees, community members, and boards of education have the same level of services that we are able to currently provide. The levy recommendation enables us to continue fulfilling our commitment to complete numerous life safety and facility improvement projects free of debt. We are able to do all of this while operating with a limited increase over the prior year that results in a monthly increase of less than $5 per month to the median homeowner. The district has accomplished numerous financial achievements over the past several years, putting itself in possibly the strongest financial position that it can be in. The result of our current position is not by happenstance. Through our long-range vision and planning initiatives, we have taken numerous strategic steps to get to this financial position with the board's support and are pleased to present a levy to you tonight that allows us to be able to continue to provide a consistent level of services while operating efficiently well into the future. Following our meeting this evening, we have set aside time for a tentative Budget and Finance Committee meeting on November 8th prior to the board meeting, should that time be needed, to review further materials. On November 8th at the Board of Education meeting, there will be a recommendation to the board to approve the proposed levy amount. That amount must be set not less than 20 days prior to the levy adoption. Then within the window of November 29th to December 6th, a public hearing notice will be published. And on December 13th At that meeting, we will have a public hearing for our 2018 levy, and there will be a recommendation to adopt the levy that evening. Cook County requires that the levy be filed by December 24th of this calendar year. With that, we'll answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions or comments?
I have a couple. Ms. Peterson, you mentioned that if we did not go to the P-TEL cap limit, we would have to discontinue IMRF payments. Are you speaking to the special payments in addition to what we levy? I have some community members that get confused. They're like, why haven't we been making IMRF payments? I'm like, we've been consistently making them. We didn't just all of a sudden make a big balloon payment. So I just wanted to clarify that. Additionally, the fund balance numbers are also, they have that built-in $2 million expenditure, right? So originally when we were looking at this, I think the presentation from Wednesday, we had about 4.4 million based on a levy increase off of what we had levied last year, and then our actuals were about $1 million higher. So then with the percentage revised, we're capturing a few $100,000 more, is that correct? Basing this levy off of the 223 versus the 222 that we submitted to the county last year, is that right?
That our levy was more than we submitted, is that what you're saying?
Yes, our collections were, our revenue was.
Our additional new property growth was a little bit more than we anticipated, yes.
Okay, so we realize that. So if we were to not, let's say we find out our IMF is favorable, and we were to only levy 1.3, we would maintain that top line where it was green with the 20 million and no allocation, correct? Roughly.
For the current year, yes.
Okay, and then moving forward, if we discontinued those 2 million special payments annually, then this increase of, let's say, 2.1 million then would cover that minus the removal of the special payments annually.
I wouldn't recommend it, but
No, I'm not asking for a recommendation,
Yes.
just clarification. Thank you.
I guess just kind of going along with the IMRF payment, I understand the logic of it, and I think it's been a good process to do, and I think we talked about looking at doing it every year, exploring whether it's the best thing to do or not. I'm just wondering if maybe down the road, there will always be people going into the IMRF, so maybe other than just making payments to it, we have to look at what we can do to maybe decrease some of the expenses. Just somewhere, when we work the budget. Just a concept that maybe we need to kind of keep in mind.
That would be reducing their salaries.
Well, maybe not necessarily reducing the salaries. I'm just talking about maybe not as.
That's what drives the IMRF payment.
I know, but I'm saying maybe not as high of an increase, or maybe bonuses, whatever it might be. But I think maybe we need to take a look at that also at both ends. Just tossing that out right now because we're talking about the payments, so.
Well, to that point, when we look at the budget and we look at the reductions in expenditures, and then we have surpluses and we've utilized those, we're looking at revenue just now. I mean, we had the expenditures. So if we set the revenue lower, then the expenditures have to follow under there, and that drives the cost-cutting initiative. If we just continue to disconnect the revenue from the expenditures, then there really is no incentive to reduce the expenditures, because we'll just come back and build off of the prior budget year and do our annual increases the way we've been doing.
So let's flip that around for a second. So if you support the cost-cutting initiative, then let's provide that direction to the superintendent. Costs don't just come from nowhere. They come from educational and academic experiences. The type of program that you direct the superintendent to provide for the community. It's what the community suggested through the strategic plan. It's what they affirmed through the strategic plan. It's what they affirmed in 2005 by passing the referendum in the first place. You wouldn't cut your food supply first and then try and scramble around and figure out what expenses to eliminate. If you want the superintendent to eliminate expenditures, you just tell him what programs you don't want, and he'll eliminate them.
I think that's a bit extreme. As far as efficiencies within a budget is what I'm hearing. the IMRF is different, but what I heard Mr. Dombrowski say is that there's efficiencies within the already budget, and since this levy affects next year's budget, this is the time to talk about finding more efficiencies if that's something this board wants to find. Is that what I heard you say?
That's correct. If like, right now, our assumptions build in a 2% annual payment into IRMF, but when we were talking about the budget, similar to what you're saying, what do we want to cut? We approved that budget. We didn't carry the discussion on whether or not we wanted to build in that $3 million annual payment. The response was, we can address that later. So later keeps pushing. We never have that legitimate discussion, and that's kind of why I'm looking at RMF now, because you're building in an expenditure annually of $2 million that drives down the fund balance, but if you never address it, you're never going to flatten out the fund balance or actually realize the increases that we may or may not have been getting.
The opposite is in fact true. That's not true at all. Making these payments isn't the expenditure. The expenditure accrues whether you make the payment or not. The problem is you have an unfunded liability. The unfunded liability is what creates an increased expenditure. It's the exact opposite of what was just said that happens.
But we carried that unfunded liability for how long before we made a decision to create an impact to it? And then we started receiving a benefit, so then we actually have a reduction in that expenditure as we're moving forward. But eventually it balances out to a point where you exceed that limit of liability, and then your annual payments are actually covering that as long as you're maintaining the needed payments for the retirees down the road. So there is an actuary event that occurs that determines what our liabilities are and what our payments need to be. And the higher we're funded, with less liabilities, the lower the cost. So we're building off of costs that we've been paying consistently with an increase. So even though we might have been levying $4.9 million, now we have a levy that is 4.8 for IRMF, we were holding in our fund balance about $2 million while we were making the IRMF payments. That was just kind of by policy. So when we look at what we're doing, if we make $2 million, we're projecting that we're going to spend, we're going to have $6.8 million to put into IRMF. That's probably significantly larger than what our liability return may be on our next IRMF statement. I don't know, but that's part of my thought process.
If you're talking about the lowest cost of operating, if you're fully funded, that's the lowest cost. Anything less than fully funded, you are incurring excess cost. If you're talking about the projection and removing it from the projection, let's talk about projections. They're very difficult to make, especially about the future.
But we're making them, and that's part of our responsibility.
You can stop the projection anytime you want. You can make the projection number anything you want. If you're not fully funded, you're paying too much. If you want them to change the projection, change it. But that's not going to do anything to what your actual cost is, because you're not fully funded yet.
Well, for our budget, we had a $3 million annual projection.
I don't care about the budget. We are talking about actual real dollars. You're either spending too much or you're not. And we are spending too much today. We are still spending too much. We're not fully funded. These are real dollars. This is not a projection. Change the projection if you want. But we're spending too much money still. I'm all for spending less. And if we want to extract it out of education, let's direct the superintendent to do that. If we want to extract it out of IMRF, let's do it. Because we're doing it and we're not impacting education. We still have ways to extract money out of things that don't touch the students. Those are the things we should encourage the superintendent to do. When he happens to come in with an actual surplus because of cost-cutting initiatives, and then you say, oh, not good enough, we want to extract more. Okay, well, he's motivated to come in with a surplus, an actual surplus, not a budget.
Well, I think for me, that is kind of one of the issues, that we do have a planned surplus, and I'm comfortable with that because that is what, but it seems year after year that we do land even much higher than that. And I think that's the conversation that needs to be had when we're having years that are unique, like the sale of a land. It makes conversation happen within the community amongst your own families saying, you know, is it too much or is it not too much? And will it impact? Can we find efficiencies? And what do those efficiencies look like? And how much money is that efficiencies over the course of the 5 years in that projection?
So one of the questions that I wanted to ask, and I appreciate the use of the chart. I didn't intend to impose that on anyone, but it certainly made it easy for me to digest the information. I think the colors were helpful as well because they draw your attention to where the projected fund balances fall below sort of the policy and what our initiatives and goals are. But I wondered if you could sort of help dollarize that shortfall. So sort of if I look at that middle scenario where the fund balances are projected at 31 and 32%, what does that mean in terms of dollars? If I wanted to change that situation so that it was, 33 or 35, what does that mean?
So as Mrs. Peterson referenced, they are funds that are in all of the differentiated
Sure.
funds. There are monies that are in all of the funds, right? So I don't want to speak to each of the individual funds, but
Understood.
in general, each single percentage point is $2 million of difference.
Okay.
So over the span of the 5 years, moving $2 million will move it 1 percentage point.
Okay. So sort of in general, as a understanding that the fund balances vary and they're not all right at 31, I thought that was an interesting point, something that personally I had not contemplated before. So for that 31 to be 33, I have to find $4 million over 5 years.
That's correct.
Okay.
If I could just make one other comment on
Sure.
that, in reference to the fund balance policy. The policy was set as a safety net, and that is the lowest that we want to go.
Okay, sure.
And we get uncomfortable when we get to that, and once we do get to that, we're going to have a conversation about how not to be there. So we want to maintain a safe distance from there.
Let's have an even bigger walk down memory lane. Subtract 30 years off the 2023 projection here. Put yourself back in the early 1990s when PTEL was imposed. The district existed back then. PTEL came about. That became the vice. The district became subject to the vice. That was before none of us were board members at that time. I could be mistaken. So we have to bring out the fact checker. Roughly 7 years after that, one of our board members became a board member, roughly. Roughly around that time, you'd be looking at a similar chart. And around that time, people started to realize, ooh, there's red in a few spots out there. We had superintendent changes. Things didn't go well. We changed superintendents again. Other board members started attending board meetings at that time. All of a sudden, they realized, you can't turn the ship around. The vice has already constrained your food supply. You can't undo what just happened. They went on. Refreshing debt. Is that the word I heard earlier tonight? Refreshing debt. Refreshing debt because why? Your food supply is either your levy from the community, or which is subject to PTEL, or it's the supplement. You issue debt to cover everything that you want to sustain your life because your food supply under PTEL is too constrained. So you go ahead with the debt and you go on for years and years and years, and it grows and you do everything you want to do, and you realize it's all coming apart. So you go to the community in 2005, you pass a referendum. We're going to fix this. You fixed it. You set it straight. Since that time, it's taken 13 more years to get to where we are today. 13 years of look back at everything that you did. For those people that got on the board recently, for those that have been on through the whole cycle, It's been a long cycle. When did the fund balance policy come into effect? 2 years after the referendum, somewhere around 2007, 2008. Why? Well, things were a lot different. When someone squeezes that vice, it really only squeezes one way. It cuts off your food supply. To levy less than what you're able under PTEL, you would effectively be squeezing the vice on your food supply again. You would be doing what happened in the early 1990s when PTEL came into place. Constraining your food supply, putting you in a direction of heading toward red numbers. It's not about the 33, the 31, or the 30. It's about actually how you're spending your money. And if we can spend less, I'm all for it.
And I guess that's what I'm asking.
And we spend less.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
my question too.
I feel like, I mean, to echo sort of Ms. Burke's sentiment earlier, we're in a year where we have, we're coming into receipt of 20 million. We were several million, we ended the year several million ahead of where we thought we were going to even end ahead. And if I put myself on the other side of the table in the community, I kind of struggle with accepting the maximum amount. And so I'm asking, what I'm asking is, can we spend less without compromising the educational opportunity? That's the question.
And that's something I think about as well. I think flat is not going to happen without negatively impacting our school district, and pretty much across the board in everything that we're here for. Rather than saying I want to put myself on the other side of the table, we are on the other side of the table, right? We're all taxpayers, we're all involved, we're all impacted by the success of the school district, by the expenses of the school district. We're impacted by whatever decisions we make regarding the levy. We're part of the community. And so I think we need to look at not necessarily cutting things, but how can we save money by being more efficient? Thing I think about often is our new buses, right? And the plan that through having those newly fueled buses, that will make it us a more efficient school district, thus hopefully experiencing some cost savings. And maybe we really explore other ways, rather than cutting programs and educational impact on our students, how we can be more efficient, make more efficient, cost-effective decisions as a school district.
And I think that's just the question I'm asking, and I think we said that it was 4.4 million, right? And we figured out that that was 800,000 each year over the course. I mean, we have a very large budget here, and 800,000 doesn't seem that much per year to find some efficiencies in. I may be wrong, and I'm happy to hear that I'm wrong if I hear that. It just feels like we have some room, and I'd like to see if my point of view is that I'd like to see if we can make that room happen.
Our biggest opportunity is in front of us right now. 80% of our expenditures, basically, it's only the teacher contract, are being negotiated right now. All the rest, you could almost eliminate all the rest, and they're not going to amount to anything. But I'm all for that. I absolutely support that. That's why some of the financial efficiencies you've been finding don't impact the rest, and you're able to make those happen. And you should take credit for that. That's happening.
Right, and that's why I go back to the IRMF payments, because we've seen it, we saw $1 million growth on the return of that, which, incentivized us to continue to contribute with a large lump sum payment recently, which then in turn also reduces the liability, but also increases the base amount where you see the returns. So we noticed that not only did our required contributions decrease, but we're growing that fund at a larger rate. So it would seem that those are the efficiencies that we're realizing. The only problem is we don't have the data. So the projection of, even if we were to cut that in half and say we're going to make our levied payments plus a $1 million annual payment, now we've seen on a 5-year projection $5 million just by cutting our special IRMF payment, whereas even in the budget, we were looking at 3 million. Now with the levy projection for the fund balance, we're looking at 2 million annually. If we go to 1 million annually, now we have 5 million that would change the fund balance at the end of 5 years. So those are the things I'm looking at. I don't know.
All of these items are true. So we are here to understand what is the board's will. We have brought you, I believe, to fruition what was our charge. You asked us to do certain things. I believe we delivered those, every one of those things. And whatever is the will of the board, we will do that. We looked at a neighboring district today in terms of what was information available on the levy. The amount of information that we have provided to you, we love to do it, and I will sit down and have as many hours of conversation and talk and discussion and present it to you in any way that would be helpful. And what we're asking is, just tell us what you want to do. I have laid out for you a plan that I think is the right one, because it is a continuation of what I thought you all asked us to prepare. So that's what I have done. I do want to address a couple specific points. Last year was a windfall from money from the state. I think it was $6 million. The state of Illinois gave us $6 million unanticipated dollars. Now, I got to tell you, how in the world could anyone, you would be nuts if you said that you were going to build that into your budget.
That was related to a prior year. That wasn't
It was
last year's money.
all previous years' monies that had not been paid to us. So I just want to reference that we have built in planned monies that would fund the future of $10 million of capital and $3 million of O&M. That was the plan. That is exactly what we laid out, and my understanding was we laid that out together. And we've presented the facility plans, and we've presented the financial plans, and we've presented the ways that we could efficientize, make more efficient our IMRF payment. To the degree that we don't have that fully funded, we are paying interest on that. So our energies were directed toward more efficiencies and making use of as much positive momentum from that. It's not a gain, it's a reduction in expenses is what happened as a result of that.
You financed all your capital expenditures through operating funds. You didn't have a $180 million bond issue to do it. You have eliminated all of your debt and funded all of your long-term capital expenditures.
Our auditors were here this week, and
Nobody does that. That is not possible.
Our auditors were here, and they did stop us and say, did I get this right? Meaning them. Did they understand that we were free of debt? We said, yes, that is correct. So one of the questions that came up, can we reduce costs? Yes, we can. Please tell us what you would, how much you would like us to reduce.
Can you reduce costs without impacting educational opportunities? And I mean, maybe I'm splitting hairs, but
okay, can we reduce costs? Yes, by how much would you like us to reduce the cost? We have brought in a plan of efficiencies each year of reductions, and we have exceeded that each year. And if you would like us to build in more, we're willing to do that.
Can we extend and expand the question, though? So if you did that, though, would you then look to constrain your revenue? Or would you look to reapportion those or reallocate those costs to accommodate the academic, educational growth that is necessary for students to compete in the world today? because you can't get academic growth without some type of change in how you deliver or what you deliver. Costs for everybody do not stay flat or the same. No business costs the same all the time and stays competitive in the world today with whatever product or service they provide. It is always increasingly expensive.
So when we look at the top line on that red, yellow, green chart, right? The $20 million, $10 million, no $1 million scenarios. Those items we have looked and forecasted and said, you know, we're not real excited about the prospect of spending all 20 of that, committing all 20 of those millions of dollars.
You could give all that back. That would not constrain our food supply. That's like an additional ingredient that gets thrown in, but that doesn't change through our PTEL limit. You could give the $20 million back happily. Just don't constrain the levy.
The levy is a one-directional source of momentum, and once that is compromised, your course is changed.
Going in the wrong direction.
Well, I mean, and that's the question. Can we, I mean, I also feel that it is a little bit, you know, it's hard for our communities to sometimes stomach what they see here that happens. Although it makes complete sense to us and we make things and we understand things at a different level, but whether it's $4 or $100, they're the ones who see the impact. And whether or not it's Cook County's reassessment issue or ours, they are the ones who see it. And so what we see out there is the question, when are you going to find some more efficiencies to run the school district? Most companies have to find more efficiencies at times. And the question at hand was, do we as a board want to ask the administration to find more efficiencies in order to have a lower levy, as you call the food supply? You know, sometimes that happens in people's business and homes, that sometimes you get a little less revenue. And I just want to address the one time of the $6 million. Year after year, it's a one-time something, it seems like here on the board, that whether it's 1 million, 2 million, there's always extra on top of the extra, and that's all I'm asking. If no one else is interested in that, I simply can move on.
I do have a question, and I know we don't have a crystal ball, so we can't really look out too far. But with the anticipation of selling the 60 acres and not knowing how quickly they're going to, you know, build or exactly what they're going to put there, can have, well, it will have an impact, you know, on our district. I know you don't have an answer right now, but I'm just wondering if there's a good bit of homes that are built, it's new growth, it'll impact our plans for the next, you know, say 10 years. So that's something that we'll have to consider down the road.
Sure. Yeah, the projections that we've gotten out of there, that we would have some additional students, but not enough to cause us to look at boundary matters or overflow at Conant.
Because that's a consideration somewhere
Sure.
down the road that we have to have. But if there's the new building, you know, we'll get an influx of cash from that. At least we should then if we do the new property.
That
Which,
will
again, could
expand the
go
tax
down the
base.
road
Yes, it
again,
will.
too. So there's just a lot of things going on with you know, those 60 acres that can have an impact. So that's why we have these discussions
Sure.
each year to kind of see where we're at and what some of the possibilities are. That was just kind of a thought that we maybe need to throw into the mix, but it could be several years down the road.
Yeah.
If the concern is the understanding of the community, maybe we should ask the superintendent to provide the publicity of the accomplishments, what has been done. Because there isn't anyone that has done everything that we have done already. And so like to to continue asking
I don't
him
feel
to
like-
do more. Yeah.
I mean, I don't
It's
feel like anyone
interesting.
is, certainly I'm not trying to
Yeah.
diminish
No,
I,
the
not in the
we
least
don't
bit.
hear
the
that. Yeah, we don't hear
administration's
that. Mhm.
accomplishments. I'm proud of them, and very much so.
Sure.
And I'm appreciative of the information. You mentioned that you went out today. I went out a couple of weeks ago to neighboring districts looking for levy information, and it was kind of like crickets chirping. But I mean, to specifically address Mrs. Burke's question, I would also have interest in the answer to the question.
What else would we cut to reduce expenditures?
Yeah.
Yeah, every year, every day. You should ask yourself that question.
Right, but I don't think we necessarily have asked it directly from this board table, and that's why I'm asking if it's someone other than myself and now Mr. Hinshaw is interested in getting that information, because if not, then we can move forward and go on. But I do want to say, I think we've done great work. I think the superintendent and his staff have delivered what we're asking, but I'm just asking, now that we're here, can we tighten it any tighter in order to function at a little bit tighter budget? That's all I'm asking.
Can we address so if he does that, because we're talking about operational things now, not financial things, because he's already done a lot of that. So if it's operational things, then can we go further and say, so if he finds things, because he'll give you a list, here's what you can have and here's what it'll save. And so then what do we want to do with the savings? Let's say you tell him to implement that. Are you considering repurposing that to other education initiatives, or are you considering reducing the food supply?
Well, you got to remember with this food supply, you're basically taking out of the cupboard of the community. So
I
even though you're
completely agree.
feeding, it's
Yeah.
a two-way street. So when you use that analogy, I just see you reaching into my cupboard, taking a can of corn.
And we are.
So,
We are, because you
yeah.
want the creamed corn that we're going to make with it.
and I don't want to go hungry.
And I'm all for that. If somebody doesn't want something, then just make the list of what we don't want and how much we're going to save. I'm
So-
all for that.
So I would like to see something related to IRMF with the assumptions we're making, because we're basing this off of a 2023 fund balance, right? These are the numbers that are in the table that we have. That is 5 years down the road, that fund balance has the expenditures of IRMF.
Those are just projection numbers, though.
But
These would be actual dollar savings.
Right, but you're asking the administration to determine savings that are going to go for 5 years, not a one-time saving. You're looking for a reduction in cost that is a permanent removal of expenditures, right? That's what you're asking for. Because you're looking for
I am not.
you're looking
but
for an
every day
annual
if we want that,
expenditure
yeah.
reduction, right?
Yeah, every day.
Right. So from my perspective, when we use this fund balance target to kind of help determine where the red colors are and the yellow colors are, that has that $2 million annually in there. That has a $10 million swing with the assumption that we're still underfunded on IRMF or we're carrying a liability with IRMF.
That fund balance target is just a risk factor for
Right.
you to assess.
Agreed.
How much risk do you want to take that you're not going to be able to provide the education that we want here, given that something goes south?
Right.
And if you want to assume more risk, then you just lower that number from 33 to 25. But
Well,
then
we're-
if they go back to, instead of issuing the tax bills in July, they go back to issuing them in December, you're going to be in the red in 1 month.
Well, I think we have a lot of, there's two things. One, I think you're asking the operational question, but it is a financial question. I think it is a fair question to ask for them to find the efficiencies and not us to tell you where to get the efficiencies from. Second fold that, I just lost my train of thought. I apologize on that. I lost it. I'll come back to it. And I think it's a bigger picture, and I think that's the point, is I'm not sure I believe $800,000 each year over the course is going to change the ship completely. And I think I just want a little bit more information to convince me that the ship will turn so that I can also support that out to our community. Because it doesn't feel like that right now. It feels like we have a little bit more wiggle room than $800,000 per year.
It's not that there's not a financial impact. It's that you're asking him to do it out of an activity or an experience for a student. It's coming out of operations where all our other financial stuff isn't.
I don't think I'm not sure, I don't think it needs to come out of the direct educational experience to find $800,000 a year.
And so
It's not my role to figure it out. I'm asking the question, is it possible?
If I can add just one little historical piece, and Mr. Lefebvre, you're much better on the years. I don't remember the year. But when we had one of the superintendents that was very short-term after Dr. Chapman had retired, we were looking at some financial issues, and that superintendent did do a list of various expenditures and some things that could be trimmed. I don't recall if you were on the board at that time or not, but there were, like 10 pages, and there were things that could be cut back. Things that we're not aware of in some cases that did not impact the students or the education.
So if that's true, then I would say you needed a new superintendent immediately. Because if it doesn't affect academics and activities, you don't need to bring that to the board. Cut the expenditure and operate the same way. I don't need to hear about it, just cut it. If you can do it without touching the kids, cut it.
That was something that was looked at that time, by the board, by that superintendent. You made a comment about making a list of things. I'm just bringing it forward that was done a number of years ago to help curtail some of the expenses and look at different ways of doing things. So yes, over the years, we've done quite a bit.
It didn't change the need for the referendum.
I think we're
Yeah,
we're
you know-
into another section.
Look, there's times where we sat at this board table and I was questioning having a $400,000 surplus and $1 million, contingency. Those are non-operational items that we had in the budget, and then the next year our budget didn't go down when we removed those. Our budget's always increasing as far as expenditures go. We find new priorities to invest in, and that's where the administration, unless you're giving them direction, they're going to always reinvest, and we're always going to have to move forward. And, it's our job to kind of say, here's the threshold that we want you to operate under. Otherwise, you're always going to have new laptops. You're always going to be turning them out. You're not going to have old buses. Everything is going to be, brand spanking new as long as the revenue's there. So when do you say, well, you know what, we got to go longer with this boiler, if you're just saying, hey, you've got the revenue, spend it. You asked me the other day, you said, and this kind of irked me a little bit, it's like, I think our administration's doing a wonderful job spending the money that we have, and you're right, they are doing a wonderful job identifying those things, but the question is, do we need that much revenue to operate and provide that same educational experience? And you go through our schools, we've got wonderful fish tanks in our media centers and stuff, and I don't begrudge anybody that, but when we're looking for some of those things that are part of the educational experience, I'm not saying we got to cut everything. I'm just saying that if we lower the revenue, I think we're going to find that some of these expenditures may not be such an immediate priority.
And I just want to clarify one thing. The fish tank was a donation from the Booster Club at Conant. So,
Right, but there is an operational
no, I
cost to
understand.
it,
I just wanted to make sure it was clear that we were not buying the fish tank at Conant.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But
Fair enough.
you make extremely valid points,
Yeah.
and I think that, in essence, is what I was asking about the efficiencies. And again, I'm going to ask the question one more time so that we can move on in discussion or onto our other items. Outside of myself, Mr. Hinshaw, and I believe Mr. Dombrowski, is there anybody else that would like?
I would like a review and further investigation and consideration for where we could possibly be more efficient.
We all
And-
want that. Everybody supports
and
that.
I know,
come to
Mr.
us with that.
Lefebvre, but if we don't have the discussion before, when the levy comes for the actual vote, we can't make a fully educated decision
I'm
with.
not arguing with you. We all want that.
Okay, so then we.
Everyone
So let's
knows
do
we all
that
want
sooner than later, so that
Sure.
we're not doing it 3 months or 4 months from now.
Well,
Well, that
looking
would
at
be
those
November
types of
8th. We
things,
have a
but-
committee.
Yeah, we have a couple. We have a couple of weeks
So,
to do it. I think that was the question at hand: is if that is something that is of interest to the board or not, and then.
it is to me.
Okay, so we have the will of the board on that.
So $800,000 of possible efficiencies, am I?
Which would
That's
give
that's
us-
what I'm asking. That's
I don't-
possible
I w- I
efficiencies. I can
wouldn't-
bring $800. I can bring 800,000. I'm not sure what the charge is.
So I wouldn't recommend a specific amount, or maybe we put a minimum amount, because if you find other efficiencies, I want to know about that too. I don't want you to say, okay, we hit 800,000, let's have a nice day.
But let's
And-
clarify. I mean, Mr. Hinshaw's point is, can we reduce the levy under the PTEL cap? We know the administration isn't going to recommend that, even if we do identify efficiencies to cut. So the question is, the next step, are we going to look at somewhere between a flat levy and the max levy increase, or the capped levy PTEL increase?
Which would bring us to the 1.05.
That's the purpose of this exercise, right? Not to
Correct.
just save more money and grow more fund balance. So in that regard, the charge should be, we want the administration to find a point where they're comfortable with operations at something less than 2.1, and to find those efficiencies to drive that purpose. I think that's really what the will of the board should be.
And stay within our recommended policy of the 33%. At the,
Well,
look,
that's, again, that 33% is a 5-year projection, and we've kind of put Swiss cheese holes in that in this discussion, so.
well, are we willing to change our policy, is the question I'm asking. Right, because if you want to shoot holes in it.
But it's the projection from 5 years from now. Are we looking for 33% in 5 years? Maybe we extend that. Maybe we say we don't want to hit 33 for 10 years, and maybe we're looking for a longer-term projection. That might be more
I would like to
acceptable
stay within our policy.
But that's an annual policy. It's not a 5-year policy. These are 5-year projected fund balance numbers. That's why you got to kind of extend it out.
I would be nervous under our policy, since whether they're 1 year or every year, unless we're going to up our policy and change it every time our projection says something differently, it's an area that I would like to stay around. But if anybody would like to go under it, we certainly can go under it.
The issue to keep in mind is the systematic change that you are evaluating. Not whether you're under or over. It's just noise, whether you're under or over 33% every year. It's just noise. The financial numbers don't come in the same in a beautiful picture all the time. It's just noise. So it's just strategic guidance. It's the systematic approach that puts you in the wrong system. You make a change, a drastic change. And it's okay to evaluate.
That's really what it is we've created a system, and I just want to make sure that the board understands that if you change the system, you're going to change the outcome. And
you're reimposing a PTEL
I just
on
want to make
yourself.
sure people understand that.
You're reimposing a PTEL. That is effectively what you would be doing.
Right, but there's other organizations that operate well under the PTEL. You know, Kane County was doing it for years, and
No, well, counties collect sales tax. We don't have a variable revenue source. Ours is fixed. It's based on real property. If we could collect sales tax as a revenue source, wonderful, but we cannot. Just like villages do too. Schaumburg Village, Palatine Village. But we don't have that type of revenue source.
and we get state and federal funds. Counties don't get those. I mean, apples.
Is there, right. Do we have a clear expectation? Are you yet clear on our chart?
I believe that I am, and you would like it prior to the next meeting. That's what I think is the key point, right? And it's designed to answer Mr. Dombrowski's question. Will that provide the board with enough information to determine whether or not you would like to pass a levy below our recommendation? And it's our recommendation today, and it's going to be our recommendation on November 8th of a 2.1% levy.
Okay, in the event that it is your recommendation and it's something that the board votes no to, what would be our steps in that case?
You cannot vote no. You have to set a levy amount on November 8th. You may say no to our amount that I'm recommending, but before the board leaves this table, you will agree to an amount that we will then take to post publicly for the time that needs to be passed. And then the board would take action on that amount in December.
Any other questions or comments?
No, thank you.
Right, thank you. This will bring us to our consent agenda. The suggested motion is that the consent agenda be approved as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mr. Hinshaw,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. LaFever,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mrs. Burke.
Aye. We have our special reports. We have our Freedom of Information Act request. Any questions or comments? We've also been given our 2018 summer school enrollment cost analysis. Questions, comments? Information on our post-high school planning nights. Questions or comments? Our 2018-2019 free and reduced meal eligibility. Questions, comments? And then also our Community Connections newsletter, strategic plan update. Questions or comments? And our popular annual financial report award. Congratulations. Questions or comments? Brings us to our new business. We have a proposed policy revision, medication administration in schools. This is our second read on this. The suggested motion is that the board policy file JHCD, medication administration in schools, be revised as proposed and included in the board policy manual. Further, the superintendent be directed to make appropriate distribution.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We have our health and dental insurance premium rates for 2019. Any questions? We have our credit card processing contract. Suggested motion that the Board of Education authorize the district to renew the contract for credit and debit card processing with Wordplay for month-to-month services as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Did we look at evaluating another provider, or we're just sole sourcing?
Go ahead.
Because this is a short-term rollover, extension of our existing contract, we did talk to our existing bank about services, but because it's only going to be a few months of extension, we are working with the same, especially because they were willing to hold our rates. And in our prior looks, this was by far the most favorable rates that we would receive.
And so when this expires, we'll go look for, or we just roll into our new bank?
So our plan would be that once we determine what our front-of-house processing system would be, that will be something that's brought to the board, and there would be a fee structure that would be associated with that. And once that is essentially put into place, that would take over for this, and this would be discontinued.
A quick, brief history on this may be helpful. This provider is the same provider under a different name. The company was purchased, and we had to buy a long-term contract in the past. And so this changeover to the month-by-month basis affords us more latitude so that we can get to better systems, more efficient systems into the future. So we're pleased to be able to have this window of flexibility.
Any others? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. LaFever,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mr. Hinshaw,
Aye.
Mrs. Burke.
Aye. We have our life safety survey introduction for your information. Any questions?
I would just note we have mentioned capital projects and also life safety. We do anticipate at the next meeting being able to bring you the life safety survey. So we're hopeful to be able to answer a little bit more of that question as well, just for a little bit of backdrop for you.
And is there any redundancy between what we're doing capital-wise and life safety? Have we noticed that there's this overlap?
There definitely is, specifically with the roofs and mechanical equipment.
Okay.
So
So we've already accounted for some of this $25 million expense already in our projections that we have within that last update of the strategic plan regarding capital plans? Is that correct?
The plan that was laid out in the materials, and I believe it's in the levy write-up this time as well, accounts for that. So between the $3 million that would be included in our life safety fund, as well as the additional capital funds in our O&M fund, that is the combination that we have been using to pay for our roof replacements and our mechanical system replacements. And that is demonstrated in our financial projections as well as in the capital improvement funding plan that was provided.
Okay, so back to the question, that $25 million captures expenditures already planned under the capital improvements budget, correct? Or no, is this 25 million minus what they identified that we've already accounted for?
Yeah, I think we can answer the question. So we don't try to put it under the capital or light. We were just calling what projects need to be done, I think is what your question is. And so
Well, no, we have a projected expenditure of 11 to 13 million dollars a year, and if $5 million of that is already in that planning, and then that same $5 million is identified under the life safety plan within the $25 million that you're proposing, then we have that expenditure counted twice. I'm just trying to, I'm asking.
we only have one list is what I'm saying. And so
So the
we
25
pay for it out
million
of different funds, but we only have one list of projects. So they're all contained, and it's just which way we're going to delegate them out until they get on a life safety survey.
Okay, because I thought that this stated we were looking at about $25 million in
y-
costs.
We're thinking it's possible to come in below that,
Sure.
but I think you're trying to say, no, we are not double dipping, is what is this the
But
question?
counting
Yes.
the cost twice, I'm not sure,
Yeah.
because I know that before we had this information, we had this projected out. So if we don't subtract it from this 25 million estimate that our architects are providing, or they're not subtracting it, I guess, would be my concern. That this is an aggregate just associated with that report.
Well, would anything, there is overlap when you said the roofs, but if it's already been done, it wouldn't hit the list anyway. I think you guys are kind of saying same thing two different ways. That even though, say, the roof was going to hit the list, it will not hit the list because we've already done it. Therefore, the projected amount it's standalone on its own. Is that correct? It's not like because we did some roof work already, it's going to be taken off the list?
No, we had that, when we looked at our strategic plan update, we received the next, for the 10-year long-term projects. And what Dr. Case responded was that under that long-term strategic capital plan, we had some roof areas and some equipment that was already accounted for. So in our last budget, we had that projected out. In our update, we had it projected out to determine that we would need $10 to $13 million annually to meet those needs. Now, along comes a separate entity outside of our capital facilities, and Mr. Cockney and they look at the entire facilities, all 5 high schools, the administration building, our North and South Academy, and they say, under state law, these are areas that need to be improved, and then they provide a report with a total estimated cost, which is that rough 25 million. That's a separate analysis than our 10-year long-term plan. So I'm just asking for how was it accounted between what they're doing and what we're doing here, and if we can expect that number to go down because we'll scratch things off the list because they're already part of the long-term plan.
And I'm saying that it wouldn't have hit the list if
But
we've
they-
already done it.
he's saying they
If we
haven't
haven't
been
done
done
it.
yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're in the 10-year
Okay, sorry about
plan,
that.
and so
We haven't touched them yet. They might be in, let's say, 2022.
Gotcha, I'm
and
sorry.
This life safety takes us to 28. So they're down the road, but they're basically saying, we realize, like our guys say, and then the outside agency says, we need to fix that.
Got it. Sorry about that.
So I think I got it.
What I would just say to summarize is that our financial plan that we have in place accounts for, we believe that what we know of our life safety study at this point, and it has to be submitted to the state for approval, that we can account for those projects within our financial plan. And the roof work that has been identified and the mechanical system that has been identified, we work very closely with these professional groups throughout in maintaining our buildings, and our priorities that we had previously identified align with those that have been identified on the survey.
Anything else?
This hasn't, since we haven't approved it and it hasn't been submitted, then the timeline for implementation hasn't started yet. And if it hasn't started yet, then we're still we've gone on a 7-year cycle, so we have 3 years left, which we don't still have to do this yet, right? So one of your considerations might be to press the pause button. If you're, right, that would be, this would all be incorporated into a press the pause button, just don't do any of these, or cross them off the list, or don't submit it. This is, so this is, this, we should really evaluate that before you're gonna move forward on anything you're gonna do with the levy, because this is purely risk management.
Yeah, it's not a full 3-year window though, so,
However, the
Our
time
last
frame
survey
plays
was
out,
in
though.
2010, so.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so this brings us, anything further? All right, we have a request for foreign exchange trips. Suggested motion is that the Board of Education approves participation in 9 foreign exchange trips as proposed for the summer of 2019. District 211 reserves the right to cancel any travel that the district deems unsafe or not to be in the best interest of District 211.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This brings us to our Illinois Association of School Boards Resolution 2018. This was for information. Any questions or comments? Mrs. Klimkowitz and Mr. Rosenblum?
I'd like to introduce everyone to the resolutions. They were included with the agenda, and we do have time between now and the III conference when the delegate assembly takes place. We even have another board meeting in between. Should there be any concerns, comments, or questions related to them. So I'd like to take just a few moments and go through the resolutions. So in your information, there are 2 attachments. The first one is more of a letter format, outlining the new resolutions, the proposed new resolutions, and the second one is the actual document, which you may have already received as well. So with that, the first set of resolutions is around student safety and protection. And there are 3. However, numbers 1 and 3 are not recommended by the resolution committee. The second one is, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that, and it's kind of, the second one is kind of an inclusion of 1, 2, and 3 all together in the second one. And really it's around having the right safety within our schools. And one thing of note is that it is making recommendations to the state to allow school districts to make a local decision regarding arming school staff. And in doing so, there are very, very specific things that the staff that could be authorized to have a weapon on their person would have to go through training. They'd have to be certified and able to have a concealed weapon license, a firearm license, and really it's not a requirement that school districts do this, but it allows them to do so if they choose. And the thought is to have, this is being really proposed by a school district who their schools are really quite dispersed. And it's not easy for them to be able to summons help if there is a safety concern at their particular school or particular schools. We have SROs in our schools. Not all school districts do that. Not all school districts can afford to do that. So this gives them the ability to have that extra help on site should that be necessary. There are background check requirements. There are other evaluations of their staff before they're being permitted to have that kind of a thing. So that is the one that's really being recommended, is to allow local school districts to be able to implement that type of a program within themselves. So that's that one. Another one is number 4 on the list, and that is around energy saving funding and borrowing. So this is one where if it is found that there's an opportunity for the school district to save energy and save money, that rather than wait to pass a referendum, they're allowed to make that decision and go with that savings program or savings vendor as a school board, opposed to having to wait and perhaps lose out on the savings opportunities that may afford them. I know, for example, here in Schaumburg, there's an energy savings program that's up to the public right now to decide whether or not they would like to go with a village aggregate program to save them, potentially save them money, or go with a different provider for electricity. And there's a certain deadline this month to which people either opt out or are included, and there's other decisions they could do down the road. But to take advantage of those savings, and here we are talking about efficiencies and savings this evening, allows the school district to be able to make those decisions much quicker than having to go through the referendum process. So that's the second one, and it is being recommended by the resolution committee. And so those are really the new ones. And then there are some that are reaffirmation of existing programs. One is around financing for public education, and it involves charter schools and the funding that they receive from the state, and the impact that reallocating or adjusting some of those monies from public schools has on those public schools. There's some new belief statements that are really those as a Illinois State School Board. One of those is around safety drills in the schools. And I know there was some communication earlier with regards to perhaps how many we do. And I think we do, is it one or two?
2 a year.
2 per year. So it's allowing local school districts to make up their own decisions as to not only how many they have, but how they're being conducted, whether they use real students. And there's an organization, I forgot the name of it, the National Association of School Psychologists and the National Association of School Resource Officers that make some recommendations as to whether or not involving real students may psychologically impact them. Certainly it has a lot to do with the age of those students and the psychological well-being of those students, as well as the staff that may be involved in a real life, for instance, armed assailant drill, right? But I know that there's some schools that do lockdown drills and things like that. So this allows, again, pushing it to the local level for those decisions to be made. And really, when you look at it, a lot of these resolutions are around having local decision-making and local control, and that's what the Illinois State Board of Education really wants, local school districts to be able to have those kinds of influences. So it's pretty cool. Then there's some amended belief statements, one around mental health services, and it's really talking about the importance of mental health services for our students and supporting those services because of all the things that are going on within our schools, from bullying to discrimination to violence and the things that we see in the news, and really further urging the state and Congress to invest in and support those types of awarenesses and initiatives at the school level. And another one is supporting student voter registration, and doing it in a nonpartisan civil way. There are a lot of findings that students who are registered voters are more civically involved, and it also says that students who are registered to vote as a student tend to make it a habit, and then they're voting more often throughout their lives. So it's encouraging people to do that as well. So those are the resolutions that are going to be up before the delegation this year.
And to follow up, I've been getting community questions about voting and do we do anything for students that are eligible to vote? Do we host any ballot or voting booths in the schools? And
We have 2 locations, and then there's one here also.
so we don't necessarily have a voting booth in each of the schools in the cafeteria?
Not in
something along those lines?
Not in all the schools. In 2 of the schools that actively have students.
Is it a challenge to make that
It is.
something? Okay.
It is. We have been back and forth with the election board to try to examine that and just it's matters of safety, and so we try to have a restricted entrance to make sure that our, entrance is
For the
controlled.
public, right.
Yeah.
But if it's a redundant voting site and that, let's say that precinct already has an alternate location, we could provide a site that's only accessible to students? Is that something that's potentially available? Do we know?
That's never, ever been
Something that-
communicated to us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good question, and piggybacking on that, I do know that, that principals or principal designees are allowed to help students register to vote. So I wonder if that may
We
be
do have voter registration activities that take place regularly in all the schools. This year at Open House, we had voter registration there as well. So we have, tried to make those services available for students, but also parents, actually too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, League of Women Voters were at Conant's Open House night.
Mm-hmm.
If I can just add one more thing, Mr. Rosenblum did an excellent job of presenting the resolutions and that. When we had the committee meeting, I did vote to support the student safety and protection because we did have several members of the school board come before us, and they're from communities that will take 20 minutes before they can get a police officer there. And this was very important to them. They had brought this up last year. They brought this back this year. And again, local control, what the school feels they need to do to provide safety for their students, and it would be training and certification beyond the concealed carry. They were very clear on that because that was one of the concerns in regards to it.
My concern would just be how safe does a student feel if they don't necessarily get along with an armed teacher or something along those lines. I've been in different secure environments just for my career and profession. Armed security at nuclear facilities or prisons, and it's a very unsettling feeling when you're unarmed and somebody that is there to protect you may or may not necessarily. I understand that perspective, but from the unarmed person that's within that secured environment, it can also have a reverse effect of making students very uncomfortable. Just my
And I
perspective.
believe that they probably, they recognize that, but I think we've got to be aware that there's a different culture in the southern part of the state. And maybe some of those young people, they've been handling a gun for a lot longer than, anybody up here north probably has. There was an article that I read in regards to one of the students that was from Texas when they had the shooting in Texas. And this particular young lady, when asked how she would feel protected or safety, and if there was a teacher that was armed or an administrator that was armed, she supported that. She thought that that would be, something that was important to protect the safety of the students, that you had somebody right there. So I guess that goes back to local control. You need to know your community, you need to know your administration, you need to know your teachers. And that was one of the passionate pleas that these districts brought forward.
And they can't do this locally without this.
Well, that's correct. The
Yeah.
reason is there are state and federal laws that prohibit having totally prohibit having weapons on campus, right? And then there are some that significantly restrict who is allowed to, like an SRO. Outside of that, they're not able to expand without the resolution and then putting it forth for legislative purposes. So,
Did they present any data?
In regards to, they presented the timeline that it takes for some of them to get there.
Something more along the lines of, do more people die from accidental gunshot wounds, or do they die from crime?
They did not present that.
Because I would agree that everyone would feel passionate that if an incident occurred, you would prefer to be able to defend yourself, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't presented in that fashion. It was, you know,
It was more about the time that it took. There was one school district that had one school located very, very close to several different law enforcement organizations. And the same school district, there was a school that was 10 minutes away, and then another school in the same school district that was 20 minutes away from any law enforcement capability unless somebody's driving through the area. So the quickest that someone could get a 911 call, dispatch someone, we're talking 20 minutes before they're able to have somebody there to take law enforcement action at the location. So it was that particular example that was given to really support why we need to have this resolution statewide.
The complementary example, of course, would be it probably takes 20 minutes for the ambulance to arrive if there's an accidental gunshot wound in the school.
Could be.
Something for them to consider if they want to look at some data before they make a decision.
Sure. And another thing, you know, if you have an SRO at all of your schools, then, you know, it's going to be at the local level to determine whether or not you want to expand
And I fully support that, though. The concept of, you know, you decide. I would just encourage them to be cautious.
And I think they were well aware of that. That was something, and,
If they
you
have
know,
the data, they would be well aware.
and, you know, and chances are, some of those people that came and presented had their concealed carry. So we were well protected, you know, at this, you know, resolutions committee.
Yeah, but having concealed and carry is not necessarily put you in a situation where you're trained in a crisis situation. And that's my concern, is the fact that whoever decides, if they decide to go this route, that whoever's going to be carrying a gun should have, at least have the same training, practice, and whatever that a normal police officer would have. I mean, that would account for a lot of time on that person.
And they are asking for, you know, each school can design their own, and one of the things that they presented was they expected to have more training than just the concealed carry. And again, that's not something we need to do here, but this was vitally important to a number of the school districts, because you had 10 that presented or co-sponsored Resolution 1. Then you had a district for Resolution 2 and another district for Resolution 3. So this is important to those school districts.
Anything additional? All right.
So I just want to clarify, do you need this on the agenda for next time, or do you all have what you need?
Do we need any more discussion on this? Are we comfortable with the recommendations so that Mrs. Klimkowitz and Mr. Rosenblum know how to represent us?
Do, yeah.
So yeah, so I think are you guys, we're not, we just wanted to give our opinion, surprise, surprise.
Prevent you.
And once again, I am looking forward to representing our school district at the delegate assembly.
Thank you. So no, we do not need to put on our November 8th agenda. Okay, that brings us to our potential topics for discussion. Anyone? Okay, and now our committee reports. Mrs. Klimkowitz with NSSEO.
All right, NSSEO, I put at your seating here, NSSEO is celebrating their 50th anniversary, and they are going to have a function on November 4th, you know, needless to say, a fundraiser, and Sunday, November 4th. So if you're interested, please register and purchase tickets to attend. And then the other function is their Harvest Festival, which is at Sunrise Lake Outdoor Education Center, which is in Bartlett. It's right across from the Hanover Township offices. And that's going to be on November 10th. If you have not had an opportunity to be out there, it's really a phenomenal place for the kids, the activities, and they've done so much to just continually improve it. So if you have an opportunity, bring the kids and go on out there. They did give us an update for the 2017-2018 school year of the mini grants. They provided 18 grants. They had $17,000. They ran from the Deaf Social Club to some special events, which would be for minor school. There was a girls' night for a sleepover, and then a separate night for just the boys, for the boys' night, something that gave the kids an opportunity to, be away from home for even just the evening. The Deaf Academic Bowl was continued. Wellness Club over at Kirk. Timber Ridge had a number of activities, the Outdoor Adventure Club. They have a new one that they've started. It's the community-based learning, and it's through Timber Ridge because that's the school for kids that have some social, emotional, and behavioral issues. They are taking trips to learn how to behave in public, which, is absolutely phenomenal, and the kids are enjoying it and taking it. Just a variety of things. Cooking club, homework club. They also had a presentation by the Jesse White Tumblers, and they had the assembly, which went, really well, and the kids really enjoyed it. And evidently somebody asked Jesse White about why he does that and his continuation and why he's involved. And one of the comments that he made is that all of the students should do one nice thing for others each day. And the kids really took that to heart, that was important. So anyhow, there were a variety of things, and they're going to be continuing with the grants for the coming year. So, thank you.
Thank you. Ed Red, Mr. Dombrowski?
I was out of town, and I think we had the fall luncheon kickoff. I think you attended?
No, I did not attend.
We had a presentation about M-Hub. It's a local groupthink manufacturing sort of collaboration center. We've actually had some connection with M-Hub. Our students have gone to M-Hub, and so it was a creative solution to some items. It was very helpful, and then they introduced formally the new executive director, and so we're off to a very good start in EdRed.
Thank you. Partners for our community, that's me. We met Monday. Things are moving along really well. Most of the community partners are working towards, as you can imagine, holiday and Thanksgiving, community supports, lots of activities surrounding that. I know we talked about last month that we aren't having the Halloween event at the Higgins Education Center, but we are doing a Halloween drive for costumes for the community so that they can come in, and we are putting our support in local organizations nearby, like the Hoffman Estates Park District. And that's pretty much it, with the exception of, and I brought this up before, that the Schaumburg and Hoffman Rotary did receive their grant for the fishing well, which is giving scholarships to adults over the age of 21 to continue their education, and they are looking for recipients of those to be vetted out and then presented to the group. And these would be people that may not have had the opportunity to further their education and would like to now to for the betterment of themselves and their families. Thank you. Budget and Finance, Mr. Lefevre.
Tonight's meeting covered more than everything that was covered at the Budget and Finance Committee meeting. So you didn't miss anything.
Thank you. Mr. Dombrowski, Parent Connection.
Yeah, we just met on Monday, and we reviewed. The turnout wasn't that great, but the people that did come, we reviewed the color-coded notification system, went over that. I think that was well received, and we also kind of discussed some of the notifications that occur with a lockdown. I think there was some positive feedback on kind of what parents' expectations might be during a lockdown drill.
Thank you. We have our announcements for your review. And then our next is entering closed session. The suggested motion is that the Board of Education enter closed session to discuss minutes of the meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act, the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, matter relating to an individual student, probable or imminent litigation against, affecting, or on behalf of the public body, collective negotiation matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, and deliberations concerning salary schedule for one or more classes of employees.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Dombrowski,
Aye.
Mr. Hinshaw,
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre, Mr. Rosenblum,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
Mrs. Burke.
Aye. All right, suggested motion that the Board of Education return to open session.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Mr. Hinshaw?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz, aye. Mr. Lefevre?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mrs. Burke?
Aye. Health dental insurance premium rates for 2019. Suggested motion that the Board of Education approve the established Blue Cross Blue Shield premium equivalent rates, contributions, percentages, and incentive structure for the applicable employee group effective January 1, 2019 as presented, and provide virtual visit services through Blue Cross Blue Shield at an amount of 52 cents per employee per month for eligible employees enrolled in a PPO plan for the period of January 1, 2019 through June 30th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Hinshaw?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre?
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz, aye. Mrs. Burke?
Aye. Acceptance of amended retirement request. Suggested motion that the Board of Education accepts the amended retirement request of Christopher Cotney, previously approved by the Board of Education on April 8th, 2016, effective June 19th, June 2019 instead of December 2019.
So moved.
Second.
No.
I didn't ask for discussion, Mrs. Klumkowitz.
I'll have to second that one.
We're in discussion mode.
And that.
The official roll call, Mrs. Klumkowitz.
All right, the official roll call. Mr. Lefevre?
Aye.
Mr. Hinshaw?
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Thank you for your service. Enjoy your retirement. Yes.
Mr. Young?
I have to agree with Mr. Dombrowski. You've been a good person to work with, so it's a yes on mine.
Mrs. Klimkowitz? I guess aye. Mr. Rosenblum?
My pleasure.
Mrs. Burke?
Aye. Salary recommendations for non-union groups. Suggested motion that the Board of Education approve a total salary allocation for technology, transportation, clerical, exempt, and management employees at an overall amount increase by 2.7% from the 2017-2018 school year, effective July 1, 2018, for the 2018-2019 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre?
Aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz, aye. Mr. Hinshaw?
Aye.
Mrs. Burke?
Aye. Administrative appointment. Suggested motion that effective July 1, 2019, Tony Medina be appointed as the principal of Palatine High School at a gross salary of $155,000.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just really quickly, how many people had actually interviewed for or applied for the position?
15 maybe. Yeah, we had extensive interviews with, I believe it was 7 people.
Okay, and did we get a diverse background? I guess.
Diverse how?
I guess we didn't have 15 male applicants. We were receiving just a variety.
We had a variety of, we had a variety of people.
And I ask, I mean, I'm not trying to be difficult, but I'm just trying to just get a quick feel for the culture and if our structure is receptive to any, individuals that are working for us to seek higher positions, that's all.
Mhm.
So thank you for your response.
Sure. Mhm.
Just now, I'm just curious. Do we ever consider male, female when we look at applications, when we interview employees?
Well, we're always identifying the best qualified candidate. I will say there are certain times when schools have a need for particular assets that people bring. So there are those assets or skills aren't necessarily defined by outward features, but there are skills, language skills or supervision skills or professional development skills that people are looking for within their particular needs at that time.
Sure, so our skills is what our needs and our skills. It's not who or what, who to begin with. We go with what is the most qualified for a position.
What's going to fit? Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mrs. Klimkowitz, aye. Mr. Lefevre?
Aye.
Mr. Hinshaw?
Aye.
Mr. Rosenblum?
Aye.
Mr. Dombrowski?
Aye.
Mrs. Burke?
Aye. Any additional comments in regards to tonight's meeting? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.